Everyone knows the headline muscle cars: Mustangs, Chargers, Camaros, the usual stuff. And yeah, those cars earned their reputation. But muscle car history is way deeper than just the poster cars. Today we're talking about the underrated muscle cars, the ones that didn't always get the hype, but absolutely delivered on performance, style, or attitude. These are cars that real car guys respect, even if they don't always get talked about online. Let's get into it. The Mercury Cyclone is one of those cars that makes you stop for a second because it feels familiar, but you don't see them often. It was basically Mercury's way of saying, yeah, we can do performance too, without copying the Mustang formula directly. Built off the Fairlane platform, the Cyclone had cleaner lines and a slightly more grown-up look, which honestly helped it age really well. What a lot of people don't realize is that the Cyclone wasn't just a styling exercise, it had real muscle behind it. You could get these cars with serious big block V8s, and Ford even used the Cyclone name in NASCAR, which tells you it wasn't some soft cruiser. This thing was built to compete, not just look good parked. The reason the Cyclone is underrated is simple. It never had the pop culture moment that other muscle cars got. No huge movie roles, no constant hype online. But when you see one in person, especially a clean example, you immediately realize it's a legit muscle car that deserved way more attention than history gave it. The Dodge Dart 340 is one of the best examples of how dangerous a lightweight car can be with the right engine. At first glance, people think Dart and assume economy car, but Dodge completely flipped that idea on its head. These cars were compact, simple, and built to go fast without trying to be flashy. The 340 engine is a big reason why this car has such a strong reputation today. From the factory, it was underrated horsepower-wise and loved to rev, especially compared to bigger, heavier muscle cars of the time. When you put that motor into a lighter body, you end up with a car that surprises people real quick. What makes the Dart 340 special is how honest it feels. No luxury, no gimmicks, just engine, chassis, and attitude. It's the kind of car that proves muscle wasn't always about size or status, but about how efficiently power was used. Plymouth Roadrunner. Yeah, the Roadrunner is well known, but I still think it's underrated for what it actually represented. This car wasn't built to impress people sitting inside it. It was built to go fast for as little money as possible. Plymouth stripped out unnecessary features and focused on performance, which was a bold move at the time. That approach is what made the Roadrunner so special. You weren't paying for luxury or image, you were paying for horsepower. Big engines, simple interiors, and a no-nonsense attitude made it one of the purest muscle cars ever built. Today, the Roadrunner is respected, but sometimes people forget why it mattered. It wasn't just another muscle car, it was a statement. It showed that performance didn't need to be expensive or fancy, and that mindset is a huge part of muscle car culture. AMC AMX. The AMC AMX is easily one of the most overlooked muscle cars ever, mainly because AMC was always the underdog. They didn't have the same budget or reputation as Ford, GM, or Chrysler, but that didn't stop them from trying something different. The AMX had a shorter wheelbase than most muscle cars, which gave it a unique, aggressive feel. That shorter wheelbase made the AMX feel tighter and more performance-focused than a lot of its competitors. It wasn't just quick in a straight line, it actually felt like a driver's car, which was kind of rare in the muscle car era. AMC wanted this thing to prove they belonged in the conversation. The AMX is underrated because people overlook AMC as a brand. But once you learn what the AMX actually was, it's hard not to respect it. It's different, it's bold, and it represents a company taking a real risk and pulling it off. Chevy Camaro Z28. The Camaro Z28 often gets overshadowed by the SS, but that's missing the point of what the Z28 was meant to be. Chevy designed it with handling and balance in mind, not just straight-line speed. That made it feel more refined and more engaging to drive. Especially during the late 70s and early 80s, when performance numbers dropped across the board, the Z28 kept the muscle car spirit alive. It still looked aggressive, still sounded right, and still felt like something special behind the wheel. It wasn't about raw numbers, it was about the experience. The Z28 is underrated because people chase horsepower stats. But if you care about how a car actually feels, the Z28 earns its place. It's a Camaro for people who like driving, not just racing. Dodge Coronet. The Dodge Coronet is one of those Mopars that gets overlooked because it didn't get the Hollywood treatment. Chargers and Challengers became icons thanks to movies and posters, while the Coronet stayed more low-key. But that doesn't mean it was any less serious when it came to performance. Underneath, the Coronet shared a lot with other Mopar muscle, but it often came in a lighter, more straightforward package. That worked in its favor, especially when you start talking about big V8 options. In RT form, this thing was absolutely built to run and didn't care about being flashy. What's cool about the Coronet is that it feels more raw and honest. It wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was just built to do its job. That gives it a different kind of appeal compared to the more famous Mopars. The Coronet is underrated because it wasn't a poster car. But if you know Mopars, you know this thing deserves way more respect than it gets. Chevy Monte Carlo. The Chevy Monte Carlo is one of those cars people argue about when you call it a muscle car. It was bigger, longer, and more comfortable than most, so it didn't fit the typical image. But once you actually look at what it offered, it's hard to ignore the muscle DNA. With the right V8, the Monte Carlo had serious torque and effortless power. It wasn't built for sharp handling or drag strip dominance. It was built to move smoothly and confidently. On the street, that mattered a lot. Another big part of the Monte Carlo's appeal was how livable it was. You could daily drive it, road trip it, and still have something that sounded and felt like a proper muscle car. That balance is something a lot of cars didn't have back then. The Monte Carlo is underrated because it wasn't extreme. But sometimes, muscle isn't about being the fastest. It's about presence, power, and attitude, and the Monte Carlo had all three. Oldsmobile Toronado. The Oldsmobile Toronado might be the most unconventional car on this entire list, and that's exactly why it stands out. Front-wheel drive muscle sounds wrong at first, especially when you think about the era it came from. But Oldsmobile didn't care. They went their own direction. What made the Toronado work was the engine. Massive V8s with tons of torque gave this car real muscle credentials, even if it delivered power differently than most others. It wasn't built to carve corners. It was built to move with authority. The Toronado also represented something bigger than just performance. It was bold, experimental, and way ahead of its time. Oldsmobile was willing to take risks when other brands played it safe. It's underrated because it doesn't fit the traditional muscle car mold. But once you understand what it was trying to do, it earns a ton of respect. Plymouth Duster. The Plymouth Duster is one of the purest examples of budget muscle done right. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't loaded with options, it was cheap, lightweight, and fast when set up properly. That's exactly what made it so popular back in the day. Because the Duster was lighter than most muscle cars, it didn't need a massive engine to feel quick. A solid small block was more than enough to make it fun and competitive on the street. That power-to-weight combo is what gave it its reputation. The Duster was also easy to modify, which made it a favorite for people who actually drove their cars hard. You could build one without breaking the bank and still have something that surprised bigger, more expensive cars. Today, the Duster is underrated because it looks simple, but anyone who knows muscle cars knows that simple often means effective. Ford Torino. The Ford Torino had everything it needed to be a legend: size, power, and serious presence. It just never became Ford's main muscle car identity because the Mustang took that role. That doesn't mean the Torino wasn't just as capable. In performance trims, the Torino was a serious car. Ford even used it in racing, which says a lot about how confident they were in the platform. On the street, it felt solid, strong, and built to handle real power. The Torino also had a different personality compared to other muscle cars. It wasn't flashy or aggressive in an obvious way. It was more subtle, more mature. That's probably why it didn't get as much attention. The Torino is underrated because it didn't chase hype. It was built with purpose, and now that people are looking back, it's finally starting to get the recognition it deserves. At the end of the day, muscle cars aren't just about the most horsepower or the most famous name. A lot of the best ones are the cars that flew under the radar, got driven hard, and earned their reputation quietly. Every car on this list has a story, and that's what makes them worth talking about. If you're a real car person, you already get it. Let me know which one you'd take home, and if you want more lists like this, you know where to find me.